Alrighty. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jeremy. I'm doing a video series on Security 101. So this will be the first part of that. I worked in the security field for about 8 years. I've done all types of security, everything from ski resort, hotel resort, to escorting, from money escorts to actually basically like an executive protection escorting for especially for money from a department store to a bank. I've also done armed security inside stores. I was a field supervisor for my last company I worked for. So this is just a broad security 101, especially if you're trying to get into the field, and some of the things that you can look for, some of the things that will help you. As I said, there's a ton of different types of security, everything from like you have your run-of-the-mill working at a mall, like, Paul Blart, to going into more into executive protection. And this is just a broad view of the security field in general. So now, as for why I'm doing this, one is because there's a lot of issues and misconceptions inside the security and law enforcement field so that the general public don't understand or don't know about. From everything from possibly from training to even as far as uniforms and standards, because not every place has the same standard. It can differ between cities, it can differ between states. It can get down to even as far as the local jurisdictions. So this just gives a broad amount of information, and I'll go into more information later on depending on the topic. But for one, there is a lot of issues as far as how guards are seen or security officers are seen. Depending on where you are, it can go by different things. Again, that's even within the industry by itself. Different people want to be addressed as different things. It is what it is. That all depends on your company. It all depends on a personal preference. There's also this whole misnomer that the guards aren't as professional as they could be. There's issues with dealing with clients. So some of this goes into customer service, because that's part of what your job is as a security guard, is customer service. Whether it's to your client, whether it's to the public, or both. It could depend on the post that you have. It's just very, very broad. Now your security basics, like your basic skills. You need to have attention to detail. Some things can be taught, some things you have to learn over time. Learn how to read people can be a natural talent, but it also develops over time. If you rely on your sixth sense, if something feels off, it generally is. But be aware of details. Be aware of your surroundings. You're going to get bored on some of your posts, but you need to stay alert. Things can happen at the drop of a hat. We've seen that in recent days, weeks, months. Shit can hit the fan relatively fast without any kind of warning. But attention to detail is the biggest thing. Learn how to read to people. Learn how to read your environment. Know where your blind spots are. Knowing your posts is crucial. You should be able to know your post like the back of your hand. You should be able to go any place on that post that's designated. You should know if there's any places, especially like if you work where there's tornadoes, you should know where the closest storm shelters are. You should have 911 programmed in your phone. That way you just have to hit a button, you don't have to dial it. As well as any law enforcement non-emergency number for anything that might be otherwise. Also, it's a good idea to learn basic self-defense techniques. People get attacked all the time. This isn't for you to go above and beyond your abilities. Never go above and beyond your ability. But you should have some form of self-defense training. I don't care if it's the MANT training, like you would work in a mental hospital, which is what we have here in Pennsylvania, or if it could be even something along the lines of even going into martial arts, mixed martial arts, but you need some kind of self-defense training. Basically, you need to be able to defend yourself, because you never know. Personally, if your state or area has programs that goes into even as far as armed security, get the training. More training will not hurt you. Especially if you think about it, anything that happens on a site where you have to defend yourself, or you may possibly have to go before a jury, or you may have to go to court. The more training you have, the more certifications you have, the better it is for you. And then as far as one of the most crucial skills that you can have is learning how to write reports. I'll do a whole video just on report writing because of how important it is. Yes, there's apps out there that can help you with getting reports done. Great tools. However, you should have the ability to write a report without having an app in front of you. The apps are great for giving you clues as to what you need to write. But again, I will go more into detail with report writing later on. So now let's get into the minimum training. Depending on where you live, like I've done armed security and security work between 3 states, Pennsylvania, Kansas, and Missouri. Here in Pennsylvania, to work just security, you don't need anything. Just have to be able to pass a basic background check and you can work security. If you want to get into armed security, we have what's called the Pennsylvania Act 235. It's 40 hours of classroom instruction and range time. If you want to go the armed security route, learn how to use your weapon, learn how to clean it, learn how to take care of it. I cannot stress that enough. Personally, whenever I was working armed, I would actually clean my firearm once a week, completely strip it and clean it once a week just to make sure everything was in working order. Because the last thing you need, especially whenever, like I said before, things can hit the fan, shit can hit the fan quick. You don't want to sit there and have a gun malfunction in the middle of trying to save yours or someone else's life or defending yourself. Keep check of your equipment. Mandatory. Now with Kansas City, Missouri, for them, it was a lot simpler of a process. It didn't take me 40 hours of classroom instruction. I went and took a 15 to 20 question test, passed it, got my unarmed license, had to make an appointment to go to the Kansas City Police Department range, go through their instruction, which was about 8 hours. Most of the companies, at least the companies that I know of in Missouri, they will cover that or reimburse you for it. If you happen to leave said company before your year's out, because your license only lasts a year, whereas here in Pennsylvania, my Act 235 card lasts for 4 years. But again, great things. Also, Missouri does something that Pennsylvania doesn't. In Missouri, you can get certified in long guns, which means rifle and shotgun. Pennsylvania, Act 235 only covers handgun and shotgun. Never covered shotguns. in my classroom instruction. Okay, so again, minimum training is whatever your state or local area requires. And anything above and beyond that. I would personally recommend having first aid training and CPR, just because that makes you more well-rounded. And here's the thing, and this is a big debate among security guards and security officers in general. Some think that security officers should fall under first responders. Some don't. Here's my take on that. When you're working a site, you are going to be the first responder because you are generally going to be the one that's on scene first to relay information to law enforcement, fire, EMS. And any report that you do is going to be supplemental to anything that the employees or other persons there are going to be submitting to your employer, whether it's to your client, to your employer, because there's going to be reports that's going to have to be made to both your client and to your employer as for what happened. So in general, I think it'd be a great idea to at least have the basic first aid, CPR, even going as far as actually knowing how to use a fire extinguisher, an AED, anything that's going to help you, because generally your job is to protect the property and the persons working on said property. Now there's going to be instances where you're not going to have the ability to do that, whether it's because of political reasons within your own company or if it's even with the client has issues. This is why I said before, you need to know your post orders. You need to know what authority you actually have. Like here in Pennsylvania, I don't have any more authority than a private citizen does, which means I can't just stop somebody and put him in handcuffs unless they committed a felony. Whereas in Missouri, I had arrest powers. And all I needed was the same thing law enforcement did, which was probable cause. But again, that authority, even though Kansas City gave me that authority, my actual authority relies with the client, not with the state. Because again, it's their property, it's what they're liable for, and what you're liable for. Which another thing I would recommend is if you're going into security work, regardless of whether you work for a company or like here in Pennsylvania, I can actually work for myself and hire myself out as a security guard or security officer with an Act 235. Companies have to have insurance on you. It's a requirement. In Missouri, it's at least a $1 million policy per employee. Here, I'm not sure what the guidelines are. I really got into it, but I would recommend having personal liability insurance. I used to carry liability insurance along with my renter's insurance. It's worth it in case you ever have to go to court and defend yourself, because civil judgments are not the same as criminal, and you can have both. So again, the way this goes through with the conclusion, my name is Jeremy. I worked in security for 8 years. I'm no longer in the security field due to an old work injury, which makes me a walking liability, but I still love the industry. I think it's necessary. At the same time that I think it's necessary, security is still just a farce because it can't stop everything. It never will. Just like law enforcement's never going to stop crime. All it does is just move it somewhere else. When you're working these posts, you have to remember an armed presence will stop 99.9% of activity. But it's going to be that 0.01% that's not going to care, that's out to do harm, and they don't care who gets in their way. Later on in this series, I will go into the more types of security, especially the ones that I worked and I know a little bit about. We talked over some of the issues that the industry has as in a whole, and I'll go into that more in depth. I'm not going to sit here and belittle any company, because all the companies are for making money. Security is looked down on because places don't make money off of security. It's actually just considered an insurance liability. That's why there's some guards that make bang and some that don't make anything. And unfortunately, that's just the way the industry is, because you have the low ballers come in and you get paid based on the contract, which means you can be paid $11 an hour to be sitting and watching a strip mall. Or you can be paid closer to $20 to $25 an hour to be in charge of 300 to 400 guards across 30 to 40 different contracts for a shift. Remember, customer service is a big thing, whether it's dealing with the client or dealing with the public. You have both issues. You have to be able to talk to people. You have to be able to respect people. You have to be able to be empathetic, not sympathetic, empathetic. You can empathize with somebody and try to come and look at things from their side and try to explain why this is or that is. You don't need to be sympathetic with them, but you do need to be empathetic, which I'll get more into that as well as we go on. Security basics, again, your basic skills is attention to detail, report writing. You should have some idea on first aid, CPR. Some companies require it, some don't. Every company in Pennsylvania I worked for, they require knowing them. Missouri, call EMS. Also, if you're working armed, you should carry a field medical kit with you, just to be on the safe side, because yes, if you shoot somebody in self-defense and you are able to, you are to take care of them until help arrives and they can take over. You have to be able to go from 100 to 0 quick. Again, remember, you are defending yourself from a person, yes, but they are still a person. If you can save them, save them. I know that doesn't make sense, and in your mind, it probably doesn't, but it does look a hell of a lot better on paper, and it's actually the better thing to do. Is just because they was possibly acting a fool doesn't mean that you can't help them if you're able to. Again, don't go above and beyond your abilities. Again, minimum training, look at what your state requires. But I would also, and I highly recommend looking at self-defense. And again, first aid, CPR, AED, basic life support, all that stuff comes into play. So, if you watched this video to its conclusion, thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, because I'll be trying to do at least one of these videos a week. So, hope you all have a great day. Stay safe.